In the last lesson, we spent a lot of time covering the theory of deep reinforcement learning, and in particular, the Deep Q Learning Network, DQN, agent model for playing the cartball game. It was important to do that. We had to get a grasp of exactly how all this stuff works, how we're maximizing our rewards, replay memory, all these important pieces of information. But now that we have that in our toolkit, we might as well make our lives a lot easier. There's no point in hand coding agents all of the time when other people have already done the work. So one way that we can take advantage of pre-existing agents is a tool, a Python library called the OpenAI Lab. So this lab was developed by Kang-Hwa Loon and Laura Gracer. Both of them are based in New York, and they're working on a new library at the time of recording called SLM Lab that will follow on as kind of like a version 2 from their OpenAI Lab. So keep an eye out for that. But at this time, this OpenAI Lab does everything that I want it to do for the purposes of our demo here. So if you make your way to Kang's OpenAI Lab repository here, you will find that there's an OpenAI Lab documentation link. So if you click through to that, you'll come to the OpenAI Lab installation page and note page. Up to this point, across all of my live lessons, we've been able to use Dockerized Jupyter notebooks for all of the code that we run through. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of the road. In order to use OpenAI Lab, we need to move beyond the Jupyter environment. This just simply doesn't work in Jupyter. And you'll see why as we get into this. The other thing is that like OpenAI Gym, which is a key library for OpenAI Lab, it unfortunately at this time isn't possible to run these experiments on Windows natively, but on a Unix-based machine like Mac OS or Linux, this will all work very well. So you can scroll down to the installation component here, and you can follow the step-by-step process here. It's pretty straightforward. So you clone the GitHub repository for OpenAI Lab, the same way that you start off installing my Jupyter notebooks if you follow my installation instructions. And then you need to install dependent packages. So those are provided here on the right. You need to change directory into the OpenAI Lab project directory that will become available when your git clone completes in step 1. And then, depending on whether you're using a Mac or Linux, you need to install the Mac steps or install the Linux Ubuntu steps. And then you need to install the project dependencies. So there are a few different ways that you can get things running here. You can pick to do things across all of the packages on your machine. You can choose to tidy away in the same way that we use Docker containers in all of my other demos to keep our software libraries discrete and separate from the rest of the libraries on your machine. You can similarly use virtualenv or conda to do that with OpenAI Lab. The final step is to set up config files. So running bin copy config. So you can run that by using source. And that will run that file, and that will set you up with a couple of JSON files for either local development, which is all we're going to concern ourselves with in these live lessons. So running on our local laptop for getting things set up. All of the prod type flag stuff, production environment type stuff, this is talking about running the code on typically a remote server where you've lined up an experiment, you've decided how you want your parameters to work on your local machine, and then you run them in production out there. But we're not going to concern ourselves with that here today. After installation, you can make your way into the OpenAI Lab directory. So for me, that's in my home directory on my machine here. And it's a simple one-liner to get us going here, but I want to show you briefly what we're doing. So we're going to just use grunt, which runs JavaScript for us, and we are going to say grunt best to run the best DQN experiment that there is within this set of experiments. I'll explain what that means in a second. Just bear with me first. So press enter, and that will take us over after these initial commands run, activating various software packages. We will be brought to a familiar interface now. We get to see our DQN agent playing the card pull game here. And conveniently now, we also get to watch a number of summary statistics over time. So we can see here the mean rewards over time. So this is how long the DQN agent, how many episodes the agent is able to balance the poll. Now recall, with the DQN agent that we trained, the simple one that we built ourselves in the Jupyter Notebook, it took hundreds of episodes before we were getting more than 100 time steps of card pull balancing per episode. So clearly this is a superior agent algorithm here. We're in a moment going to go look at its parameters. We can see here already that the card pull is being balanced readily by this agent. So it has mastered this task. It is doing very, very well. So our mean rewards over time are continuing to climb comfortably, and as are our total rewards per episode. We can see that our loss has largely stayed small. So pretty cool to see this happening in real time. And look at this card pull balance. It's doing a really great job. So what are the parameters for this? We can use Control-C to stop things running. And then we can have a look. So there's a config file. If we change directories into the config directory, and we have a look at what's in there, so we list the files, there are two JSON files here that are of interest. Default.json is for setting up the configuration for local runs, and then this production one is for the production runs. Because we're just doing this locally, let's have a look at the default.json file. We can see that there's not a huge amount of parameters in here. So this is JSON. You could use Vi. It's my choice of a text editor on a Unix-based machine. So with Vi, you can navigate around and change text within the JSON file. Vi is a really efficient tool if you're not familiar with it. You can do the Vim Adventures game online to learn how to use the keyboard shortcuts. So it's this online game for learning the Vim commands, and so that you can really efficiently process text in a Unix-based environment. So let's head back into that file with Vim. So if we wanted to change our experiment, we would change this word right here. So the other things in here we're not too worried about at this time. Just so that you know they're here, there's this ability to sync data into the directory of your choice. The default is this Dropbox directory. And then you can also have Slack notifications. So you can have instant notifications from a Slack bot about how your experiments are progressing, whether they've finished, for example. But our main interest here is this experiments parameter. And so we can see here that experiments, it's currently set to the DQN experiment. So right now it would just run that one experiment. Well, what does that mean? How does it know what to do? To answer that question, we can back up, change directories back up into our main OpenAI lab directory. And we can change directory into this reinforcement learning /spec subdirectory. Let's have a look at what's in there. In here, there's a bunch of other JSON files. So there's one JSON file that I obviously made here. The key for running these with OpenAI Lab is that any files that you want to run as an experiment specs file, you have to have this _experiment_specs .json suffix on your file names, and then they'll be recognized. So there are a bunch of JSON files here that come as default with the library. So let's have a look in the classic experiment specs one, for example. In here, we can see when you start OpenAI Lab yourselves, the default experiment that we'll be running is this quick start DQN, which is playing Cardpool version 0 with a DQN agent that we are very familiar with. You just specify in the JSON here what OpenAI Lab game you want to be playing, which agent from the library of agents that the OpenAI Lab provides, and I'll show you guys how to pick different agents momentarily. And then there's a bunch of different parameters that you can select and search over. So let's find in here the DQN experiment itself. So we have right here, the highest level key represents the experiment that you want to run. So remember in the config.json file, we specified that we wanted to run this all lowercase letters DQN experiment. Well, all of the parameters are listed here. So that's the experiment that we were calling with grunt best that set running, and it picked from all of these possible experiments the best one, the best performing one, to show us in real time as it trains. So that's how you roughly get OpenAI Labs started, and that's how you can run the best experiment. Up next, we're going to look at how you can modify the parameters yourself to run your own experiments. So we'll get to that straight away.